Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Subplot of Course, a podcast discussing new science fiction work on the second Tuesday of every month. I'm Stavros, and with me is someone who would probably have to find a new profession post-big water apocalypse, Charlie. Say hi, Charlie.
I mean, wouldn't that be most of us?
Probably.
Yeah.
But Charlie teaches math. Probably not much use for math post-big water.
Yeah. Especially underwater.
It's true. Also with me is Vincent, who is analyzing the potential of medicine men against potential viral outbreaks. Say hi, Vincent.
Dude, it's super OP. Hello everyone. But medicine, man, like magic medicine, like you could just cure whatever you want. It's big medicine. That's what you want.
Vincent is an epidemiologist. And finally, we're also joined by Adrian, who probably still looks at CDs in libraries, even though it's 2019. Say hi, Adrian.
I literally did that like a week ago, so.
How did I know?
Wait. So, like, you just look at it?
With his laser eyes.
He can just read CDs.
Like, they have glasses for that nowadays, Charlie.
Yeah, I would assume so. But anyway, Adrian is an English literature PhD candidate and teacher. So today we're talking about Trail of Lightning, written by Rebecca Rowanhorse and published in 2018. And you guys should be prepared for spoilers. So to talking a little bit about what happens in this book, in a post-apocalyptic world, global warming has triggered the Big Water, a major flooding of the North American continent. Our main character, Maggie, lives on the former Navajo reservation. She's a monster hunter, living in a trailer and taking jobs wiping out monsters. And while she's a recipient of clan powers, which provide crazy physical or mental abilities, she's pretty emotionally damaged by the loss of her loved ones and her former immortal mentor, Nezgani. I think that's how you say that.
That's pretty good, Stavros.
I mean,
Thanks.
You had the audiobook, so how did they say that?
I had to figure out how to spell it. That was the tough part. But anyway, so she's lost her former immortal mentor, Nezgani, who has started her on the monster hunting path. Soon, Maggie discovers the plot of a nearby witch that appears to be making monsters that are terrorizing nearby settlements. She's joined by Kai, a charismatic medicine man with clan powers of his own, to discover the source of the monsters. After encountering various enemies of both the mortal and immortal types, and even making a few friends with a lady that owns a bar for some reason, she discovers that she is being manipulated by Mai, the trickster coyote god, into fighting and slaying her former abusive mentor. The twist comes at the end, where Maggie almost turns against Kai, once she realizes his clan powers allowed him to manipulate people, including her verbally. But in the end, she shoots and beheads Mai, and shoots Kai to distract Nezgani long enough to imprison him. So that's a lot. Crazy stuff happens right there at the end. The book ends with a clear setup for the sequel as Maggie takes up Nezgani's lightning sword.
But the moral of the story is whoever has the biggest gun wins, because she's the only one who had a gun.
That's true. So talking about this book, this is obviously a sci-fi podcast, and we selected this book because it was kind of a post-apocalyptic scenario. It's very obviously a fantasy book, but I'm just going to say, for the sake of this podcast, we're just going to table that whole thing, and we're just going to talk about it anyway, even though it's
we're not going to completely table it, because I think we should talk about the fact that there's not very much science and like technology in this book. And
we'll definitely talk about how the world is set up. Yes, we're definitely going to get on that. But yeah, the fact that this may not be exactly a sci-fi genre, okay, we kind of get it. We're just going to kind of ignore that for right now.
But it did get nominated for Hugo and a Nebula, which is part of the reason why we thought it was a good candidate.
Yes, which are definitely prestigious. So let's actually talk about the world first. So, and I'm very interested in how it holds up, especially for you guys. This is obviously part of the reason why we picked this book. It's kind of post-apocalyptic. I talked a little bit about it in the setup for the plot. I was hoping for a little bit more world building details there. There's a lot of, obviously the book itself is very in the voice of Maggie, the main character. So you don't really, there's not exactly like an omniscient voice telling you, it's like, well, the big water lasted 5 years and then blah, blah, blah.
There was energy wars. I was curious about the energy wars for sure.
Yeah, there is some mention of that.
I think it's the energy wars which caused the big water, which makes you think that somehow nuclear or large weapons were involved that lay waste to the planet. But for whatever reason, there's no nuclear fallout.
Well, they talk about how it's the transition to the sixth world and all that stuff, which seems like a little more mystical and religion-y. I think, like, Adrian, I know I was talking with you about it. Isn't that, like, actually, like, a thing in cultures or something like that? Like a type of mythology or something? Or religion?
I'm only guessing just because of the fact that this is what Shadowrun also does, right? They call their world when like magic reinvigorates it, and the Native American sort of pantheon reemerges, and their version of magic comes in the sixth world. So that's the only reason I would even guess that.
That's it. And speaking of bringing all the mystical stuff back, like I wanted more world building details on what exactly about the apocalypse and the big water triggers this, but I don't really think she goes into a lot of detail, and I think that's my main like complaint, because it is interesting. And I keep comparing this in my head to American Gods, which I read a few years ago, where like it clearly explains like why the gods are there. And without going too much into that book, like I wish there was more about like what about the disasters make all of the Native American stuff kind of flourish. Like what triggers the clan powers, what triggers the gods, and maybe we'll get more of that in the subsequent books. But was it enough for you guys how it was presented here?
I was actually thinking, kind of, as I was reading the book, I was kind of wishing it was set further in the future so that the setting was kind of more accepted by the characters, with the fact that it didn't really go into the details that much. Like, it could refer to them without it being kind of like in the character's own past, remembering what is kind of current day today. Like, I think that might have helped it get away with being a little vague about the details.
Yeah, because she's the main character, and a lot of other people have basically lived through it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if this happened in the timescale of the books, most of us would be alive in this period, which it seems weird to have it kind of missing a lot of those details. But
the West Coast got wiped out all the way to Albuquerque, so we'd be dead.
Yeah.
But other people would be alive. I think for me, it is the fact that she didn't explain as much kind of is part of the reason why it falls more into the fantasy scenario. Like, magic suddenly exists. Like, it's very common tropes in fantasy where like you just kind of accept part of the world building without very much explanation. For instance, the Navajo reservation is surrounded by four sides by a 50-foot wall, of turquoise, and like every cardinal direction has a different material. It's like wait, how did that get built? And does Trump want to hire some of these guys to maybe build a turquoise wall down south?
To pause on the Trump thing, I mean, there is obviously some real world commentary happening here with, big water is a Trumpism that he tweeted about the Puerto Rico thing, where how it's hard to get resources there and wall building. So there's definitely some of that in her.
Trump read this book before a lot of his speeches. It explains so much.
I'm not sure that's true.
Big hair talks a lot. I think that's his magical power. BS and get away with it.
So the first thing I think that it makes sense for us to say is that because of the way the mythology works, it kind of feels like us four, are not the ideal readers for this book, right? In part because we're four guys, and in part because
I wanted to kiss Nazgani too. Come on.
This particular project, right, of sort of importing a mythos into another genre is a really kind of popular way to reinvigorate a mythos, right? Like the biggest version of this is something like Tolkien, right? That his ability to kind of bring in the Germanic and Nordic pantheon and whole sort of world, right, into fantasy, essentially the creation of fantasy, kind of is responsible for our Western culture's obsession with the Norse gods, right? We saw this more recently, I guess, like Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
Yeah, I was. Have you read that? Because I was going to mention, like, with kind of the writing style and like the amount it goes into it without really going into the like mythos details, it felt kind of like a young adult version of introduce people to these gods and this culture and some of these ideas through what's kind of like a more just typical action fantasy sci-fi type story.
Mm-hmm. And there's a story reason for why this stuff isn't explained, because it would be weird for like a first-person narrator in Maggie's position to constantly be thinking about like the roots of this mythos or the overall rules of this world, right? But that is constantly done in other books like this, right?
Even though I was like, maybe if it was further in the future, it would allow us to avoid all that. Like, I definitely preferred this to something like Ready Player One, where he spends 2 chapters just being like, and this happened, and I felt this way about it, and I hated him.
Tell us how you really feel, Charlie.
Let's just end with that comment. We're done today.
Okay? Charlie?
Yes, Charlie. Okay.
Oh my god. I just say, like, yeah, the fact that it's first person, I think, actually does the book some favors.
Yeah, because you get the unreliable narrator, where if someone forgets it, it's like, well, yeah, I don't remember what happened last year in politics or current events or stuff like that. So you can kind of
She's
find
got
it
other
very
things going on. Murdering monsters.
Yeah.
Yep.
Being
Except,
sad about
like, that's-
Nizgani. Do you have anything to add on that, Adrian? I mean, did
I
it
think
work
that-
for you? Basically, is the question. I mean,
I
because
mean-
like, are we the target audience? I mean, I don't think we have to be Native American in order to appreciate it. But she does like heavily rely on the pantheon in order to do this world construction.
It kind of puts us in an interesting position, right? Because I think it's rare to feel so kind of left out of knowledge of the larger world, right? And it's probably pretty empowering for Native American readers, right? For whom some of this stuff will be more native and more obvious.
Sure.
I actually wanted, like, more of that in the book. Like, that's the things I actually found really interesting.
Yeah.
Was, like, the different types of monsters, the different types of gods, the lore,
Yeah, super
I can't remember
creative.
the names, like the
the-
mother and all that sort of stuff. Like, I wanted more of that to appear more often.
I love all mythology. Like I remember as a kid growing up thinking mythology is awesome and reading about Greek mythology and wishing
Yeah.
that there was more like knowledge out there about the various pantheons that various cultures have. And I thought Native American like mythology was always really cool too. I didn't really get to know much about it. Like, except for like, you kind of get more like Latin American, like Quetzalcoatl, like, and some like the other like, super kind of like Mayan Incan kind of gods, much less about the Native American kind of gods. So that's part of the reason I thought this was really creative and really interesting. It's like, it's almost like, someone writes a Harry Potter book and like, okay, this is Western magic. But then you read like Chinese magic and like, Korean versions of it, it's like super different. And like, you have like voodoo and like this was a chance to read about Native American magic. I really liked it. I thought it was very creative. It's so different because the cultures aren't cross-contaminating as much, and their ideas are so different.
It also bucks the trend, right? I think that American stereotypes and Native American sort of religious beliefs is rooted in like Pocahontas, right?
Yeah,
like this
for
sense
sure.
of like, we are at peace with nature. And like one question I was thinking about is like, why a post-apocalyptic novel for this kind of mythology, right? Like that's kind of an interesting choice. I mean, obviously it's a very trendy and really interesting genre, but for there to be enough elements in the mythos to kind of support that sort of reading is really kind of fascinating. Like I'm with you guys. Like, I really wanted more, and that's probably a really good thing for a first book in a series, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely this is a trend bucker in terms of A, female character, B, Native American race for the main character, and C, like I think almost entirely the story almost entirely takes place inside the walled reservation area. I think, right?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So I mean, this
I don't
entire
think-
novel
They
is,
never leave, so.
yeah. So this entire time, it's all Native American,
Accessible
everything,
by
and you-
truck.
Yeah, and you almost never see that like in any medium I've encountered, at least. So I think having to establish that as it's something that sets it apart from other pieces in the genre is pretty good. It's definitely one of the bigger pluses for this novel.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think, my favorite part of the novel was just kind of like the overall setting and introducing the reader to the mythology and getting more involved in all that.
And one thing that struck me about the whole world building was that there was a complete absence of a lot of modern technology, like no computers, no cell phones. I think there was like a landline and that was about it. So it kind of made me think also like what would have to happen in order to destroy all that and make it such that it was basically non-viable enough that you wouldn't even try to bring it back. Like I'm thinking like EMP blasts, like mass destruction of like, anything like of infrastructure. Like, I mean, they had electricity, so they had to have some sort of power plant. I don't think they're all in
And-
solar.
They do mention that they're lucky in that they have an oil source, even though
Yeah, so
like,
they definitely
specific
have some
gods,
power,
they
but
control that.
modern technology is like wiped out. There's no. Did they even mention like they're not really even planes?
Yeah.
Definitely no trains. Like
There is-
it's
There is a mention of tech insofar as like her truck runs on any kind of booze.
yeah, it's like ethanol.
That's like the
based.
only tech
She has
in
an
the whole
ethanol
book.
truck.
Yeah.
Well, they name what type of truck it is. I'm like, if you just poured booze into it, would it run?
No, you have to convert those things. Like you can like bioconvert to run on like
Yeah.
French fry oil and stuff like that. But I think booze is also an alternative.
And that's and that's probably where it's like I felt like things were a little weak. Where it's like I'd like a little more details on, like a little more care for those types of details or whatever. Get even more into kind of the specifics of like cool stuff is brought up, but just kind of left there.
It also kind of means also that nobody really won the energy war, right? Because if
energy wars, everyone loses, Vincent.
Yeah, because you think that you would own the planet at that point. If like the Native Americans are reduced to like shotguns filled with like corn husks and flowers and stuff, like you would probably take over most of the United States at that point.
Well, they seem to imply that basically the energy companies were going to win the energy war, but then like the whole transition to the Sixth World happened and murdered off all of like the world's infrastructure and most people.
So points of comparison here, right? Like in Shadowrun, right, the Native Americans essentially like take over like large parts of America because they are closer to the magic sources of things than most Americans are. Right?
Remind me what Shadowrun is again, Adrian.
So it's a sort of cyberpunk-y and magic crossover sort of series of novels, games. I think there may have been a TV show, or there is one proposed. Where it's like set in the near future. There's like a fully immersive version of the internet, but there's also magic and like all of the sort of stereotypical and non-stereotypical magic races and magical sort of systems come back into this sixth world, which they use the same terminology.
I wonder if
that's one point of comparison. The other one I'm thinking about is one of my favorite post-apocalyptic novels is When the English Fall, which is a story about like an Amish community in an apocalypse where all electronics are wiped out. In other words, like that's perfect, right? Like the Amish would extremely
go Amish,
right?
I mean, they call everyone else the English, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the name for people who are not of the faith, right? And there's something kind of similar going on here, as at least I assumed, in that sense that like we tend to associate reservation land with land that is cast off, that is desolate, that is kind of in some ways post-apocalyptic in the sense that it's often not fully integrated into modern, modern grids of electricity or sewage or whatever, right? And that felt like a sort of the book sort of decreased level of technology felt like a nod to that, at least that stereotypical image of the reservation.
Yeah, totally. This is definitely not a casino type situation. This is a cast off piece of land that is not super teched up or anything. And I mean, and this seems like a fairly typical like post-apocalyptic thing where nobody has gas because it's like very Mad Max type situation. Nobody has it, or it's very highly prized. So the average Joe Schmo in the street doesn't have the access to power and that kind of stuff. So for me, at least, I think I buy it.
Yeah, it's a totally valid synergy, right? It didn't bother me at all reading the novel. Like, I think it's a very serviceable, sort of very fun read. If I can only have like one criticism of it, honestly, is that the genre conventions of the post-apocalyptic novel and the Monster Hunter novel, they kind of limit the book a little bit too much, right? They kind of overscript a lot of the action, a lot of the plot, and don't really let the really interesting ideas that go into the world building fully unfurl.
Yeah, so let's talk about the plot actually. So I mentioned the twist at the end, but let's expand the scope of that discussion to be like everything plot related about this book. So to quickly recap, Maggie's just on her own doing her Monster Hunter thing. She basically gets conned by Trickster God to fight, to go to a bunch of places to do research and then fight him with the intention that Maggie would kill him, and then it ends on this kind of cliffhangery thing after the reveal happens there at the end. So how do you guys feel? Just anything plot related, like the pacing, the twists. What do you guys think?
I reread it just before the ending specifically. I reread the ending just before we recorded, and I actually kind of like how it ends. Like, it's kind of interesting that that Coyote has a grudge against Nesgani, right? But was training Maggie to basically fill his role while also getting revenge on him, right? Like, it's like that kind of interesting moral complexity that is so associated with trickster gods. It was nice to kind of see it play out in that complex way.
It was very interesting because it also felt that Coyote was almost more powerful than Nesgani in some way, because apparently Coyote raised her from birth almost from like childhood. So he was able to see her potential before she awakened. Because what he does is he kills her grandmother and sets her down this path where she awakens in the situation where her grandmother gets killed. That being said, Coyote could have groomed like hundreds of thousands of Padawans and be like, oh, I know who's going to awaken with the Force. I might as well go and piss them all off, and I get send an army of Awoken against Nazgani. So it makes you kind of think like how many other ungerminated seeds like Coyote left out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that he trained her just to kill him. I think it was also to replace him, right? To make sure that like humanity was not without some kind of monster slayer. That's why it's like, I was worried that he would figure out how much better you were than he was, is something that he says to her.
Right. I think honestly, my 2 cents here, like I enjoyed the twist when it got to there. So like the whole ending part, although like I'm a little like back and forth on like the because it's her writing when it comes to like action maybe a little bit questionable in my book, but so the ending was decent when it got to it, but the pacing leading up to it, I say in the first maybe 2/3 of the novel, maybe even 3/4, where just everything felt like this detour from her hunting down this supposed witch that's generating these monsters, which of course we find out later is Maggie, the wolf, the trickster god guy. It's just like I had some time. I mean, obviously I was listening to it in audiobook form because that's the best way to ingest novels.
Yeah, for illiterate people.
But I was having times where like Kai and she and Maggie are going places, and I'm like, what? Where are they going? They go to the library to get CDs. I'm still not sure why they did that, and I just had some problems with the pacing. And I don't know, what is it? Just me? Tell me I'm crazy.
No, I got a question actually. Because Coyote sent her on a specific quest with those hoops that she eventually uses to tie down
the whole Canyon de Shay thing and all that stuff.
Yeah, to get like the breath of life, right? What if she actually did that? Then none of this would have happened, right?
Well, I'm wondering if Nazgani had been somewhere around there, and if it would have just cut off part of the novel and gone straight to the whole binding situation. Like, I'm wondering if Coyote had that information, like Nazgani's, maybe his base is there, or maybe his new motorhome that he was living in, away from the character.
Live in motorhomes?
And so since she wasn't going there, he arranged the fight in the club.
Yes,
right?
that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Is that it would have been simpler if she had followed Coyote's directions, but Coyote was like could not quite convince her to go straight there, and because he was a moving target at that point, he had to arrange a final fight.
That could be it.
That helps.
But did you guys ever have this the same feeling
Pacing.
I had, where it's like, what's happening and what are they
So
doing?
Yeah.
I think it depends on how you interpret the chain of events, like things like going to the library, et cetera, they were related to the plot because it was Kai who said, I think there are records in our Native American history about these monsters, essentially. Because I think I vaguely remember something about it, but I need to jog my memory. We got to go to the library, because once I know more about these monsters, we can get a better idea of what made them or who made them. So there definitely are reasons for many of the things, and I know that pacing-wise, it felt a little bit slow, because I think all the twists came at the end, which is kind of symptomatic of many novels, is that if you're going to have a twist, you want to reveal it at the end. But it just meant that there were very few twists in the beginning, so it felt very heavy backloaded, to your point, Stavros.
Yeah.
Just seemed a little too on the nose to have it be like, I killed your grandmother, like right at the end, especially after you just had the reveal that he set up the whole like fight your lover type thing.
Luke, I am your father.
You
There's
save
kind of
that
like
for
three back-to-back twists right at the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where at the end, and then the twist after that where it's just like, well, everyone's cool because I killed the guy who made all the monsters, right? And he's like, no, that guy has a power and I must kill him. It's like, oh no, she has to kill both her lovers. I think it was just like a little too convenient and like emotionally driven right at the end, where I'm kind of wondering, like, is there a better way through this? Or it's like, could she just tell him, like, after she killed Kai, like, nah, I'm not going with you. Like, was it that bad if Nazgani was just kind of running around killing monsters afterwards? I feel like I missed something.
Well, the thing is, she kills Kai, but it's not because he's necessarily a bad guy. Like, I think...
Well, I understand that, but yeah.
Yeah, because she's waiting for Kai at the very end, because he's big medicine, so he's going to bring himself back to life, theoretically. I guess he's like the Navajo version of Jesus or something.
I was thinking Wolverine, but sure.
Whoa, now we're really mixing pantheons. Oh my god.
Yes.
So the first thing, like, I think, obviously Coyote's like, Bond villain speech, bad idea, right? But
I think that was my biggest complaint. So
I even found you like a lover so that you wouldn't feel too bad when you killed this guy. Like, that's the extent of my mercy, is what he says. He says something like that, and I'm like, that completely negates anything that you've done to sort of make her feel better about this, right? But the second thing is, I think that the book really kind of the pace of the plot is dictated by the pace of the character development of Maggie, right? That she kind of has to come to terms with the fact that she's been engaged in an abusive relationship with Nesgani, and probably is also in like at least half of one with Kai, right? And her killing and binding of these two, right, is her triumphing over these two, again, versions of abusive relationships. I mean, that feels like a pretty surface kind of symbolic reading there.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was saying when it's like the ending felt more like emotionally driven than like this is what she needs to or supposed to or even should do.
Right.
So, focusing on the main character, Maggie, for a second here, I actually like I like the idea of her character a lot. She's a combat badass. She is emotionally wrecked, and I sympathize with her a lot, especially with the twist where you find out Kai was manipulating her too. I was like, oh shit, this.
So many members from Star Wars' dating life.
I was had PTSD, man. No, but I mean, I like the character a lot. The strange thing about it is maybe it's the writing style, but we experience the whole book from her perspective, of course, and maybe it's just like kind of like a young adult tinge to it, possibly. But she's like constantly. It's kind of like the anime thing where she blushes too easily and constantly is commenting on like Kai's attractiveness, but then she's not attracted to him, but he's so attractive. And then like even the other characters like, ooh, he's so attractive, and like you find out later it's his clan power, and I was like, oh my god, please stop, like. I get it. He's a pretty boy. I get it.
This is why I had the disclaimer that we are probably not the target audience.
Yeah, because I was even saying, like, I think I felt like we're implying, like, with the cultural stuff, we're not the audience. I feel like just age-wise and, dare I say it, gender-wise, we're not the target audience.
I don't know if I would agree with that. Just because it's a female main character, I don't think we need to be female to appreciate it necessarily. But there's something in the writing style and, like, what I was describing before, it kind of gives me that same idea, though.
It does feel a little bit more young adult, mainly because she's not in a committed relationship. I think for many of us, I mean, we're in the age where we're closer to committed relationships, so it feels like this whole kind of like flirtation is like, oh, I'm in love with my mentor. Oh, I'm in love with this new hot guy. Like, it feels a little bit more like young in terms of the love, like very quick to fall in love and quick to be in love with someone.
Crushing on her teacher type situation.
Yeah, I mean, if I had read this back when I was in my more like teenage formative years, I would have been like, I identify with this. It's like, oh yeah, someone's attractive and like, maybe you read a little too much into some of what they do, and you've like, oh, maybe he likes me, or maybe she doesn't like me. Like,
I was with you stabbing me in the heart or kissing me. I can't tell.
Stavros, yeah, I remember when we were that age. You were totally this main character.
I'm sorry, Charlie. Were you saying something that was not related?
No, Stavros, just you elaborate on that. I think I was totally on board for it and understood like what was going on up until the like he kisses me and murders me at the same time point, where I was just like, okay.
Yeah. Abusive relationship type situation.
Killing me softly with it. No.
It's like that's where I'm just like a little like on the nose in terms of the like in a little like overly dramatic for like why? It's like I felt his kiss as his knife plunged into my chest, and I was just
it's like, a metaphor, Charlie. It was a metaphor.
No.
I think there's a larger kind of like genre question here actually, which is kind of interesting to me, which is that when I was thinking to like relationships and certainly like sexual encounters, of which there really aren't any in this book, but in science fiction, right, they're usually either very misogynist or very ungendered in a sense, right? Like if you think about like Captain Kirk and like all of his sort of encounters with aliens, right? There is something. Yeah. I mean, it's not even really racy, certainly to us nowadays, right? Like there's this weird expectation of science fiction to not have the same register of deep emotions that this book presents us with, right? Like it's usually stuff like awe or terror or tragedy, right, or something along those lines, and not quite these sort of very everyday, sort of grappling with oneself in an almost much more immediate way.
Yeah,
for emotion.
Sure. Yeah, and I think, and that part of the character, herself, I found appealing at least. But yeah, again, it's something style wise. I think.
I was saying right until the twist at the end, I had actually grown to like kind of the way the plot was going and the character interactions were going and everything like that. I think just like the ending, like almost all of the twists kind of pushed it a little
too much for you.
It's like to the point of like parody a little bit at the end where I'm like, okay.
You know why? I think actually it's a little bit of selection bias, to pull some like terminology out here. I think it's because we read so many sci-fi books where the overarching theme is so epic and so hugely consequential. Like we just read a story, like a space opera where like the AI is wiping out planets and stuff like that. Yeah. That the amount of time spent on an individual's romance feels like inconsequential to planets being destroyed and entire races being genocided.
We've got some like genre whiplash or something.
Yeah, I think just us stepping back and reading such a small, like kind of like a local novel, like it's set in like basically a city almost, like, or like, a county. It's like you're not going to get worlds just being destroyed. You're not going to get like races being crushed. You're not going to get AIs, enslaving mass swaths of humanity. It's just a girl. I mean,
there's no scrodes, there's no spice.
Like, no, I think it's
not enough scrodes. So for like the second episode in a row, like I'm gonna come at this from the exact opposite perspective of Vince, and the exact same place.
Do it, Adrian.
I was actually really into the kind of internal life of Maggie. Like it was actually really interesting to see this depicted. But I was into it to the point where it stopped mattering. Like the overall plot stopped mattering to me.
You just cared what happened to Maggie?
I was, in part because again, like the genre of the character, right? Like, of course there's going to be a twist. Of course she's going to triumph. Like that moment when Nani like stabs her, like of course she's going to survive, right? That the genre conventions like suck a lot of drama out, and it leaves a lot of room for paying attention to this character's inner life, right? But yeah, that kind of clash of writing style and genre and all the rest, right? I think that it does drain the novel a little bit of some of its potential.
It's like a little too cliche for you, is what you're saying, in that sense.
I think he's saying that the plot was predictable and that like she can't die, but the romance was unpredictable. Like you couldn't tell who she would end up with or how it would resolve, and that's what he was into.
It's a trade-off that you have to make when you do a novel like this, where you're sort of importing a mythos into another genre, right? Like at some point you have to allow the genre to impose itself onto the plot in order to make the plot recognizably of the genre, right? Because if you mess with it too much, then you lose that kind of ability to draw on the emotions, the well of sort of thought processes that go with that particular genre.
Okay, I could see that.
I've gotten confused with the constants and the variables. I messed up that equation. Adrian's gonna have to re-explain that one for me.
You write a post-apocalyptic novel, right? Then you are thinking along a certain set of concepts and ideas, right?
Yeah.
And if you
it's got to have zombies. It's got to have like dirt bikes and Mad Max.
Yeah. And so this is sort of a basic genre theory. Like if you mess with it too much, then the genre becomes unrecognizable, and you can't draw on those concepts and ideas and feelings. Right, and that's kind of... You want to play in a sandbox that everyone recognizes, and if you make this too weird, then nobody can follow along with your story. Exactly, and you can't you can't pull from that sort of set association that we make with the post-apocalyptic novel, right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, let's move on to a different segment, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun as we play a game here. I want you guys to tell me your pitch for a new clan power that would benefit you in this kind of post-apocalyptic scenario. So hypothetically, you are living in this Navajo reservation and you have a clan power. What is it and why? And then at the end, we're going to vote and see whose clan powers we think is the most popular. So I'm going to go first. I would say that the best clan power to have is not the Wolverine healing, although that is quite useful. I would. You don't want the claws and the healing? That would be even more useful if you just get two powers, claws and healing. Yeah, and just put some adamantine in him. No, so I'm gonna say it's the power of supernatural insight. So imagine that you're in a negotiation or in a battle, and you draw upon your clan powers to give you insight about the nature of the person you're negotiating with, or the weakness of the monster you're fighting. Or even, insight with the creatures around you. You manage to to do some insight on the deer you're hunting, so you're able to track them more easily. This could give you all kinds of advantages here. So I feel it kind of applies to a lot of situations and could end up saving your life.
All right, so you got to choose 2 powers, Stavros, because Maggie was 2 powers too. Maggie had speed and super berserk killing senses.
That's true.
That's her combination. So what's your second? You got perception.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Any other power? I'm confident in saying I only need the
single power.
Yes.
You are incestuous. Your mom and dad had the same power.
They're the same clan. I'm doubled up on the inside clan, basically, is what I'm saying.
What color's your blood? And do you have 10 fingers and 10 toes, or you got a few extra?
I'm a 5-fingered. Anyway, yes, that is my pitch.
Wait. So one of my big questions throughout the books, every time they mention 5-fingered, I was like, how many fingers do the gods have?
We go find out in the sequel.
Well, they did mention that like other regions probably got their own gods or whatever coming after them. So I guess being part Italian, I'll go with some Roman whatevers.
Okay.
I mean, I figured I'd go with Ulysses because it's just like the gods hate him and he wanders around, yet he's okay anyway, so that sounds cool. Just have everything be terrible, but you never die and you just kind of chill and like make your way around while everyone dies around you because that's sad. And then Dionysus, because who doesn't like agriculture and specifically alcohol?
Okay.
What would that power be?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's what I
mean,
asked.
to find it and promote it, which is ironic considering in real life I have no gardening abilities whatsoever.
Like wine would like crawl to you like the turkeys do for the turkey people in this book.
Oh yes, the turkey! I'd be the turkey people, but Italian, so it'd just be wine.
So the grapes crawl to you.
So you got some kind of like wine growing ability, like grape growing.
I mean,
plant power.
I think my favorite thing anyone pointed out to me was if you look at the Roman Empire, it is largely a map of where grapes grow.
Yep.
That is
And
fair.
just like, that is perfect. They just got to Germany and they're like, ooh, what's this wheat stuff? Gross.
All right, so Charlie is the power of the grape. Who would like to go next?
Okay, I chose 2 animals because it felt in keeping. The platypus and the narwhal.
Okay.
So the platypus looks harmless, has a poisonous spur, so people would like not suspect that you could kill them, and then you could. And the narwhal, because it's a giant-ass horn on its head that people would pay attention to, and not the poisonous spur that would kill you.
And you can, and your offspring come out of eggs if you're a platypus.
Yep, that's a bonus. Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Well, you don't have to be pregnant as long. You could just sit on your eggs every once in a while, and you could be in tip-top fighting shape.
So what is the power then when you summon the power of the narwhal?
The power of the narwhal is to look harmless to people and to be able to kill them with poison.
Oh, okay.
Poison.
Because platypuses have a poison spur, which just makes them all the weirder as animals.
Okay, that's a
They
good
have this
one.
weird claw that comes out of their hind feet.
Okay, interesting. And Vincent, what do you think?
I think I chose my powers not necessarily to empower myself, but maybe more for the greater good. So I didn't choose animals because Maggie had like speed and killing instinct, so it seemed to be more like kind of abstract ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I was banding about a couple ideas. Charlie, I did like the alcohol one because I was thinking about it, because you could also be the god of transportation because everything runs on gas. The gas is all alcohol, right? So you could be not just feeding the people, but also feeding the cars.
I
like that one a lot.
You'd have
That was my second choice.
justifying running your truck on wine.
If you're Italian, I mean,
Why
come
not?
on. That and
So
wine.
yeah, Italian cars probably do run on wine.
Yeah, and carbs, any type of carb.
No, they wouldn't because they'd have to drink their wine.
Well, yeah. Cars guzzle and you guzzle too. So my 2 powers would have been the power of memory. So some sort of eidetic memory, because in a post-apocalyptic situation, the loss of knowledge is catastrophic, right? And the loss of expertise is catastrophic. So they've got this library which nobody cares about, which probably has basic physics, basic engineering, basic car repair, like a bunch of very interesting skills, which are probably going to burn down, like given like how badly they treat their libraries. But eidetic memory, so you can actually, and like kind of just memory in general. So you can remember all, basically Wikipedia. Turn me into Wikipedia. And my second power would be a way to disseminate the information, to share the information with others. So if you give me some sort of telepathy, like even a short range or a long range thing, then I would basically be like the knowledge oracle for an area.
It's like info dump. You just be like, here.
Info dump. So the thing is,
Wikipedia.
it would help on so many fronts because you could pass medical knowledge to doctors. You could pass, fighting knowledge and technology knowledge to all sorts of people. You could have knowledge of growing crops and what types of crops work and the weather cycles and how to repair roads and how to maintain your turquoise walls. A lot of things which would be useful not even for governance but also for medicine and health in general. So knowledge and ability to transfer.
Okay, interesting.
So basically, you're the lame ending from Fahrenheit 451.
I'd be the wise man. I'm the wise
I was
man.
thinking
I was saying,
Area
like,
51 too.
The mother is a Bene Gesserit and the father is a Mentat. That sounds kind of like.
There you go.
Yes,
Wow.
there you go.
All right, so to recap, mine, the best one, is double up on the insight. Charlie's is the power of alcohol and grapes and wine.
Also, just like being able to make it for no reason.
Okay.
You're Bacchus. You're not Dionysius. You're just Bacchus.
Yeah, Bacchus for sure.
They're the same thing. I chose Dionysus. I did say the wrong one. I meant to say Bacchus because that's the
Yeah,
wrong.
you want Bacchus.
Yeah. All right, so insight,
yeah.
wine, and then Adrian's is the narwhal, the poison, but also looking
Poison
harmless.
platypus.
Yes, and then Vincent with the eidetic memory and info dumping capabilities. Without being able to vote yourself, tough
Over
choice
someone
for me.
else?
I really like Vincent's because it has the most application, but then if you die, you're dead. So, and then the thing is lost. So I'm going to vote for Adrian on this one.
Poison.
The poison while looking harmless. I think that's good survivability for post-apocalypse. How about you, Charlie?
I mean, I like platypi and narwhals, so Adrian.
Okay. And Adrian.
Probably Vince, since I can't vote for my own.
Okay.
Is this a more practical thing? And it's always fun to have Dune pop up in some other book.
Okay. Yeah, I like that too. And Vincent.
No matter what I say, Adrian wins, but I'm going to
That's-
vote for Charlie because I like alcohol. I don't have anything better to say than that.
Wow.
It's the alcohol version of the turkey people.
Yeah,
Wow.
if bottles of scotch just rolled their way to me, I'd be pretty set in a post-apocalyptic world. Like,
Yeah, do
you
we
see the
even
alcohol
need
just
the
like roll into me?
post-apocalypse?
It would be paradise. It's not post-apocalypse. It's paradise.
I never thought I'd say Narwhal wins the competition, but here we go. Congrats, Adrian.
No,
I think it's
platypus
also
won too.
impressive that
Platypus,
Charlie's power
Narwhal.
might be racially insensitive.
Yes, it is. The Native American alcohol experience was probably not the best.
They even mentioned that, right, as like one of the tropes.
Charlie is a classic white man.
Wow.
Bring the
I guess
alcohol.
we're going to race
Americans,
now.
every chance he gets.
All right, so let's go to our wrap up segment. So things you liked, things you didn't like, the best thing and worst thing about this novel. I will go first. Best thing. I think the premise in general is neat. Monster Hunter makes for an interesting, if somewhat predictable thing, especially for the main character. The main character I liked a lot in concept too. I like the idea of like badass action hero who's emotionally, kind of a little fragile. Kind of makes me think she's kind of like John Wick. She's got like the I'm mad because of personal reasons, and now I'm gonna kill lots of stuff.
Her dogs were okay though.
But yeah, so I like the main character a lot. As far as worst things, I wish there was more detail on the world. I just wanted to know more about the world. Why are there monsters? More about them, but we just don't really get that just because of it's from, the Maggie lens, so we don't really get a lot of that. And then something about the writing, just didn't click with me. There's just like too much talk about how cute Kai is, and God, I don't remember if you guys remember when Maggie is like dressing up for the party with all the monsters in it. It like goes into detail about like how skimpy her
Midriff
outfit
top.
is, and I was just kind of like, this is like something out of the WB or something, where she's like, I'm so awkward. I was just like, that's just
Most
something-
monster hunters wear chainmail bikinis. Come on, son.
she was so
So
badass, and yeah. So just something about the style just didn't quite click with me. I wanted more, but I guess in some ways that's a good thing too. So let's go to Adrian. Things you liked, things you didn't like.
Yeah, I really love the world building in this. Like, it's a really interesting take on again bringing another mythology into this genre. I just kind of wish that the book is going so big and so small at the same time that those two things could both sort of meet in a more kind of potent concoction, I guess.
Yeah, that's good opinion there. Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, definitely have to agree with both of you. Like, I was going to say the mythology and Maggie herself are definitely the highlights of the book. Like, at the very start, when it's like, I'm the lone wolf, I was prepared to just be like, oh my god, what is this? And then it's like, pretty much like, even within like the first couple chapters where she's fighting the first monster, I was starting to buy into it. But yeah, there's just something about the way the kind of tropes present themselves, especially when like the world and the mythology are such like a good source of material. And there's just a couple things where, like, she wanted to get to the next plot point a little too fast. It's like, oh, and then we saw the wall, and I was prepared for, like, this big old description of what the wall is like when the character sees it, and instead we're just kind of moving on to the next plot. Like, I wish there's a little more to that, but overall I enjoyed it.
Yeah, a little interesting plot pacing going on there, maybe.
Yeah, it's just, like, pacing and just kind of like what the focus is on like specific scenes. I felt there's more that I would have liked than was there necessarily.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want to add in there, like, this was actually a really enjoyable novel. Like, I probably finished
Oh
it
yeah.
4 hours, and like I haven't done that in a long time with a book. Like, something which was so digestible.
It's a
and
quick
so,
read for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Vincent.
I'm going to go a little bit different from you guys. I actually liked her depiction of society, Navajo society. The fact that payment is in barter. There are no like platinum and gold chips and payment in bitcoins,
Bottle caps.
trading in like rugs and like hard material goods. It's very
Pendleton blankets. I love that.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's very that level of detail lends a lot of credibility to the society that she's built. The people that she interacts with, like in the very beginning of the book, are kind of like mob mentality. Like, we really don't like people like you who have magic powers. We just don't understand you. It's like, these small like little details like lend a lot of like, you can imagine how society, like a group of people, would be really scared of, one, a monster came and took one of them, and then two, they have to go hire a different monster to kill the additional monster and bring someone back. There's a lot of realism in terms of society. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
In terms of like the cons, I think that it is more, she's a victim of how compelling her world is. A world with only 2 gods, a coyote and a lightning god, feels like there should be way more gods on this reservation for some reason. And if there were monsters, all over the place killing people, like somehow they would have made an appearance. So it felt maybe a little bit too insular, maybe because she didn't have enough time to develop that many characters, but it felt like there definitely should have been more there from like, it's a logical standpoint that, the people are dying. There's got to be like, like the turkey god, like there's got to be some gods who can do something like Avengers Assemble or something.
In the sequels, you don't know.
They meet the Catwoman at the bar arena.
Yeah. They meet the cat lady.
And they mention like Nazgani's mother and a bunch of the mythology and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it just felt
I wish that was more.
Felt like
I
it would
wish
have
that was built
participated.
upon more, but yeah.
Like if Coyote's making a bunch of monsters killing people, it wouldn't have just been Nazgani looking for and a bunch of humans. It would have been like Nazgani's mom is like, hey, no, this is okay.
Yeah.
Or me, Coyote's mom was like, what the fuck are you doing, Coyote? Stop it.
I actually had a similar sentiment where like, why is this pitched battle of gods happening like right where Maggie is? But it's the same. It's just kind of like a contrivance of the plot. Just kind of like how why is Picard both like the Klingon arbiter of succession and becomes Locutus? It's because he's the star of the damn show.
Yeah,
it's the same.
It's also a scope issue, right? Like if every god was involved in this like story about this one girl, that actually kind of disrupts.
Yes. It'd be too much.
I was going to say, we're talking about it being a smaller story. I thought it worked where it's like she's kind of mixed up in the middle of the conflict between these 2 gods. Like, I thought that worked for me.
Yeah. Anything else you want to include, Vincent?
Otherwise, I'm glad in another book with a female protagonist. The only other book I think that we read was the one that was where those 4 women, like they went into the alien universe and they all killed each other.
Oh, Annihilation.
Annihilation. Yeah, that was the only one with female protagonists. And I enjoy a change of pace every once in a while because I feel like paternalistic sci-fi is kind of a thing.
What about Ravna in the last book? She was there.
She was there. She was there, but she was pretty static. As far as characters go, she was a main character, but she was pretty static. But
More of a dog at a Scrode book than it really was a sort of gendered book.
I mean, yeah. It's kind of hard to pay attention to the women when they're Scrodes.
Yeah, I for sure am on board with maybe we can pick out some female protagonist novels to pick out in the future for sure. I'm definitely keen on that.
in the end, I would say I recommend the book. It is interesting. Whether or not I would read the next few books in the series, it's harder to say. I give this kind of like a B kind of rating. Like there are many other books I would like to read. This one was pretty good, but perhaps not the most compelling book of the season.
Yeah.
But good overall.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there are definitely
Like,
there's one sequel out and one in the pipe for I think November. So
Yeah, my copy came with like a or an excerpt, like part of a chapter of the next book, and I read through that. Like I was still compelled to go through it. And I actually think it seemed like it was still interesting. So I was like, yeah.
cool, awesome. Well, I think that just about wraps things up for us. So of course, if anyone has any feedback or suggestions on books we should read and discuss, you can reach us at subplotofcoursepodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter at subplotpodcast. And for July, very exciting, we're going to be reading Mecha Samurai Empire by Peter Tirias. We'll see if the audiobook person says Mecha. I guess we'll find out. So this should be a very fun July. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I feel bad now.
No.
Or we do it every episode, and the one episode I didn't do it, everyone yelled at me, and I was very upset.
Charlie's always upset. Are you okay?
Fine. I'm fine!